The sun at the Oakwood Country Club was blindingly bright, reflecting off the crystal glasses, and my husband Gabriel's perfect smile. We were the image of success. My best friend Grace was to my left, sipping a mimosa. Then, my 5-year-old daughter, Maria, reached into Grace's designer purse, looking for gum. She didn't find gum. She pulled out a heavy, black metal rectangle, the corporate Onyx card. She held it up, her voice cutting through the chatter. "Mommy, why does Auntie Grace have Daddy's special work money?" Grace dropped her glass. Gabriel turned the color of the linen tablecloth. And in 3 seconds, the life I thought I knew evaporated. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. I didn't scream. Screaming is for people who are surprised. And deep down, in the part of my brain I kept locked away behind 12-hour nursing shifts and mortgage payments, I wasn't surprised. I was just finally looking at the ledger. I took the heavy metal card from Maria's small hand. It was sticky with spilled mimosa. I used a linen napkin to wipe it clean, the motion precise, clinical, like cleaning a wound. Gabriel was still staring at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. Grace was blotting her dress, murmuring excuses that evaporated in the crisp air. I stood up. "We will discuss this at home," I said. My voice didn't shake. It didn't even sound angry. It sounded like a judge reading a verdict. I took Maria's hand and walked away from the table, leaving the shattered glass and the shattered silence behind us. I didn't look back at my husband or my best friend. I didn't care about their humiliation. I only cared about the data. I strapped Maria into her car seat. She looked at me with wide, confused eyes. "Mommy, is Daddy in timeout?" she asked. I looked at her, really looked at her. For years, Gabriel and Grace had spun this intricate web of late-night meetings, business trips, and joint ventures. They had constructed a reality so complex that I felt guilty for even questioning it. But Maria didn't care about the narrative. She just saw the prop. She saw the card where it wasn't supposed to be. It took a 5-year-old's uncorrupted lens to cut through a decade of gaslighting. Truth is simple. It is black and white. It is a metal card in the wrong purse. Lies are what make things complicated. And I was done with complicated. I didn't drive home. Home was where the emotions were, where the photos of our wedding hung on the walls to mock me. I drove straight to Gabriel's office downtown. It was Sunday, so the building was empty. A silent tomb of glass and steel. I had the security codes. I had the passwords. Gabriel had given them to me years ago when he needed me to transfer funds to cover payroll during the lean months. He probably thought I had forgotten them. He was wrong. I sat at his mahogany desk, the leather chair cold against my back. I logged into the corporate finance portal. The screen flickered to life, and there it was. The hemorrhage. Panic is a luxury for people who aren't triage nurses. I didn't have time for it. I just started clicking, opening tabs, tracing the flow of money, like I was tracing a vein. It wasn't just a few unauthorized dinners. It was a lifestyle. $6,000 at the Serenity Spa in a single afternoon. $12,000 for inventory paid to Graceful Designs LLC. $3,000 for consulting fees wired directly to Grace's personal account every 2 weeks. The scroll bar on the right side of the screen was tiny, indicating pages and pages of transactions. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, freezing my heart. I hadn't just been a wife, I had been an investor in a fraudulent enterprise. I realized then that Gabriel wasn't a struggling tech mogul waiting for his big break. He was a parasite, and I had been the host, working double shifts at the hospital to pay the mortgage while he played CEO with stolen money. The numbers on the screen weren't just digits. They were hours of my life. They were Maria's dance lessons I said we couldn't afford. They were the vacations we never took. I printed everything. The printer hummed in the silence, a rhythmic, mechanical sound of evidence piling up. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was an auditor, and the audit was just beginning. I sat at the kitchen island, the cold granite pressing against my forearms. The printer ink on the stack of papers in my bag was still fresh, smelling faintly of chemicals and ruin. The front door slammed. It wasn't a hesitant close. It was a declaration of war. Gabriel walked into the kitchen, his tie loosened, his face flushed with a mixture of scotch and self-righteous fury. He didn't ask where I had been. He didn't ask why I had left. He went on the offensive. "You humiliated us," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You made a scene in front of the most important investors in the city. Do you have any idea what you have done to my reputation?" I didn't answer. I just watched him. It was fascinating. In a clinical sort of way, he wasn't afraid I had found out. He was angry I had stopped playing along. The back door opened, and Grace slipped in. She wasn't holding a mimosa anymore. She was holding a tissue, dabbing at eyes that were perfectly dry. She looked at me with a wounded expression, the kind she used to wear when she wanted me to cover her shift or lend her a dress she would never return. "Jasmine," she said, her voice trembling, "I cannot believe you would think such terrible things about me. We are family." Then came the story. It was a masterpiece of fiction. They sat across from me, united, weaving a tale about a surprise investment. The charges at the spa? Networking. The money sent to her boutique? A bridge loan for a joint venture they were planning to launch next month. It was all for me, they said. They were building an empire for our family, and I had ruined the surprise because I was too insecure, too paranoid to trust them. I sat there listening to the static of their lies, and I finally understood how I had let it get this far. It is called the boiling frog syndrome. You do not throw a frog into boiling water. It will jump out. You put it in cold water and turn up the heat, degree by degree. It started years ago with Gabriel missing dinner once a week. Then it was the separate bank accounts for tax purposes. Then it was Grace making little jokes about how boring my nursing job was compared to their high-stakes world. I had accepted the temperature rising, degree by degree, normalizing the disrespect, until I was scalding to death and calling it a warm bath. But looking at them now, seeing the panic behind their eyes, the water wasn't just hot, it had evaporated. "You are being crazy," Gabriel said, slamming his hand on the counter. "You are ruining the family vibe over a misunderstanding. Give me the card back, Jasmine. We have meetings tomorrow." His hand was twitching, a nervous tic he only got when he was cornered. Grace's face was expectant, waiting for me to fold like I always did. They thought they could bully me back into submission. They thought if they yelled loud enough, I would forget the $6,000 at the spa. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy, black, metal card. It was already canceled. I had reported it lost the moment I left his office, but they didn't need to know that yet. I slid the card across the granite. It made a sharp, scraping sound. "Here," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Gabriel snatched it up, relief washing over his face. He thought he had won. He thought I was the same Jasmine who worked double shifts to buy him his first suit. He didn't realize that Jasmine was gone. He was looking at a ghost. "I'm going to bed," I said. "I have an early shift." I walked past them up the stairs. I didn't lock the bedroom door. I didn't need to. They were downstairs celebrating their victory, drinking my wine, probably laughing about how easy it was to handle me. Let them laugh. Let them think the water is fine. They didn't know I had just turned off the stove and the house was getting very, very cold. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. The house was silent, heavy with the scent of stale wine and lingering deceit. I didn't make coffee. I didn't pack lunches. I dressed in my scrubs, pulling my hair back into a tight bun. It was armor. I drove to the bank, not the hospital. I had called in sick, something I hadn't done in 4 years. I sat in the plush waiting area, watching the digital ticker tape scroll by with meaningless numbers. Finally, a door opened. David, a forensic accountant I knew because his son was in my pediatric ward last year for appendicitis, waved me in. "Jasmine," he said, his face grave. "I pulled the records you asked for. It took some digging." He laid out the spreadsheets. They were a roadmap of betrayal. The joint venture Gabriel had screamed about last night? It was a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. Grace's boutique had been technically bankrupt for 18 months. The investor capital Gabriel claimed to be managing was actually a series of high-interest personal loans he had taken out against the business assets. And then I saw the transfers. It wasn't just that he was spending money, it was how he was spending it. He was funneling cash directly into Grace's personal accounts to cover her rent, her car lease, her credit card bills. He was literally subsidizing her entire existence while I was picking up extra shifts to pay for our groceries. This line here, David pointed with a pen, consulting fees. $3,000 every 2 weeks. Consistently. I stared at the number. That was exactly my take-home pay from the hospital. He was taking my labor, my sweat, the hours I spent away from Maria, and handing it directly to Grace so she could play shopkeeper. I felt a wave of nausea, not from shock, but from recognition. I remember the nights I came home exhausted, feet aching, and found Gabriel working late in his office. He wasn't working. He was managing the ledger of his life. I remembered Grace complaining about how tacky it was to worry about money while wearing a dress paid for by my exhaustion. "Is the company solvent?" I asked, my voice hollow. David shook his head. "Barely. He's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Paul is his cousin." I realized then that I wasn't just a wife. I was the only solvent person in this entire family. They were playing rich, acting out a fantasy of high society on a stage built of credit cards and fraud. And I was the one paying the electric bill to keep the lights on. "Print it," I said. "Print everything. The shell company, the transfers, the loan documents. I need it all." David hesitated. "Jasmine, these are serious financial irregularities. If this gets out..." "It's going to get out," I said. "But not yet. I need one more piece of the puzzle." I left the bank with a thick folder under my arm. The sun was shining, people were walking their dogs, the world was continuing, as if my life hadn't just been revealed as a counterfeit bill. I got into my car and sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. I wasn't going to confront them yet. Confrontation was emotional. This needed to be surgical. I needed to know exactly how deep the rot went. I needed to know if there was anything left to save, or if I needed to burn the whole structure down to the ground. I started the engine. I had one more stop to make. David pulled one final sheet from the stack, his hand trembling slightly. "Jasmine, there's one more thing. I wasn't sure if I should show you this yet, but you need the full picture." He slid the paper across the mahogany desk. It was a transfer confirmation, dated just 3 days ago. Amount, $60,000. Source, Maria's College Trust Fund. Recipient, Graceful Designs, LLC. Authorization, Jasmine Reynolds. I stared at the signature at the bottom. It was my name. It had the loops of my J and the sharp cross of my T. But the ink pressure was wrong. The slant was too perfect. It was a forgery. A clumsy, desperate forgery made by someone who had watched me sign checks for a decade. The air left the room. My vision tunneled until all I could see was that number, $60,000. That wasn't just money. That was Maria's future. That was every birthday check from my parents, every bonus I'd squirreled away, every sacrifice I had made so she wouldn't have to start her life with debt. Gone. Vaporized to pay for Grace's failing vanity project. "They stole from her," I whispered. The sound was strangled, unrecognizable. They stole from a child. This wasn't embezzlement. This wasn't marital fraud. This was a felony against my daughter. The man who was supposed to protect her, the father who tucked her in at night, had liquidated her safety net to buy another month of pretending to be rich. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a sharp, twisting agony that had nothing to do with heartbreak and everything to do with betrayal. The narcissistic injury, I remembered reading about it once. People like Gabriel and Grace, they don't see others as people. They see them as mirrors. Maria wasn't a person to them. She was an asset to be liquidated when the mirror cracked. They stole her future, not because they needed bread, but because they needed status. They needed the facade more than they needed their own child to have an education. It's a felony, isn't it? I asked, looking up at David. He nodded slowly. Wire fraud, forgery, theft. If you report this, I stood up, clutching the paper so hard it crinkled. There is no if, David. There is only when. I walked out of the bank into the blinding sunlight. The world looked different now, sharper, crueler. The last vestige of the woman who loved Gabriel, the woman who made excuses for his ambition, died on that sidewalk. In her place was something else entirely. A mother who had just found the wolf in the nursery. I got into my car and drove. Not home, not yet. I had one more stop, one more person who needed to see the ledger. Patricia, Gabriel's mother. The matriarch who had always treated Grace like a second daughter. I needed to know if the rot went all the way to the root. I needed to know if I was fighting a man or an entire bloodline. I pulled up to her manicured colonial house, the engine cutting out into silence. I grabbed the folder. It felt heavy, like a weapon. I walked up the path, my heels clicking on the stone, sounding like the ticking of a clock running out of time. Patricia opened the door, a polite smile plastered on her face. It faltered when she saw my expression. I didn't wait for an invitation. I walked past her into the living room, the folder clutched in my hand. Jasmine? She asked, following me. Is everything all right? Where's Gabriel? Gabriel is busy, I said. Busy pretending to run a company. Busy stealing from your granddaughter. I opened the folder and handed her the transfer confirmation. The one showing the $60,000 moving from Maria's trust to Grace's LLC. The one with the forged signature. What is this? Patricia asked, squinting at the paper. That is a felony, I said. That is Gabriel stealing Maria's college fund to pay for Grace's boutique. He forged my signature, Patricia. He stole $60,000 from a 5-year-old. Patricia sank onto the sofa, the paper trembling in her hand. She stared at it for a long time. Then she looked up at me, and her eyes weren't filled with shock. They were filled with resignation. He told me he was just borrowing it, she whispered. He said it was temporary, a bridge loan. My blood ran cold. You knew? I didn't know he forged your signature, she said quickly, but I knew he was moving money. He came to me last week. He was desperate. He said Grace was in trouble. Grace is always in trouble, I shouted, startling her. Why is he so obsessed with saving Grace? Why does he rob his own child to pay for her mistakes? It's not normal, Patricia. It's not just family loyalty. What is going on? Patricia looked away, her gaze fixing on a framed photo on the mantel. It was an old picture, taken 25 years ago. Gabriel as a teenager and a young girl, Grace, standing next to him, looking at him with adoring eyes. They aren't cousins, Patricia said softly. The room went silent. What? Grace isn't my sister's daughter. My sister couldn't have children. She adopted Grace when she was 12. Gabriel was 15. They bonded very quickly. Too quickly. She took a shaky breath. When they were in their early 20s, before he met you, they were together. not as family. As lovers, the world tilted. The closeness, the late nights, the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. It wasn't just a financial betrayal. It was an emotional, incestuous knot that had never been untied. I thought it was over, Patricia wept. When he met you, he promised me it was over. He said Grace was just family. But they never stopped, did they? They've been playing house with your money all this time. I felt sick, physically sick. I had been the third wheel in my own marriage. I had been the bankroll for their twisted love story. Every time I paid a bill, every time I covered a shift, I was funding their affair. Does anyone else know? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. No, Patricia said, just us. And now you. I took the paper back from her hand. Not just me, not anymore. Jasmine, please, she begged, standing up. Think about the scandal. Think about Maria. I am thinking about Maria, I said, my voice hard as diamond. That's why I'm burning it down. I walked out of the house, leaving Patricia weeping in her living room. The truth was out. The rot went all the way to the core. There was no saving this. There was no fixing it. There was only the end. I got into my car. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Gabriel. Investors are here. Where are you? We need to present a united front. I looked at the message and smiled. A united front. He wanted a performance. He wanted the dutiful wife to stand by his side and nod while he spun more lies. I checked my reflection in the rear view mirror. My scrubs were wrinkled. My hair was messy. I looked exhausted. But I also looked like something else. I looked dangerous. I'm coming, Gabriel, I whispered to the empty car. I'm coming to present the truth. I put the car in gear and drove toward the office. The board meeting was starting in 20 minutes, and I had a presentation of my own to make. I walked into the conference room. It was all glass and chrome, designed to intimidate. Gabriel sat at the head of the table, flanked by 3 men in expensive suits, his angel investors. Grace was perched on a chair in the corner, looking small and nervous. When I entered, the conversation stopped. Jasmine, Gabriel said, standing up, his smile tight. Honey, you're in your scrubs. Is everything okay? We're in the middle of a strategy session. I know, I said. I'm here to update the strategy. I walked to the table and placed the folder in the center. I didn't sit down. Gentlemen, I said to the investors, my name is Jasmine. I'm Gabriel's wife, and I think you should see this. Gabriel lunged for the folder, but one of the investors, a man named Robert, who had always been kind to me at holiday parties, got there first. He opened it, he saw the spreadsheets, the transfers to Grace, the bankruptcy filings for the boutique, the forged trust fund withdrawal. What is this? Robert asked, his voice low. That is a record of where your money actually went, I said. It didn't go to R&D, it didn't go to marketing, it went to rent for a failing dress shop, it went to spa days, it went to maintaining a lifestyle neither of them could afford. Gabriel's face turned purple. She's lying. She's hysterical. She's upset about a family dispute. The numbers aren't emotional, Gabriel, I said. The bank records aren't hysterical. You forged my signature to steal from your own daughter because you ran out of other people's money to burn. Grace started to cry. A high, keening sound. We were going to pay it back. It was just a loan. Robert looked from the papers to Gabriel. You told us the capital was secure. You told us you had a runway of 18 months. He has a runway of 0, I said. He's insolvent. The room erupted. The investors were shouting. Gabriel was shouting back, desperate, cornered. Grace was sobbing. I watched them for a moment. The chaos I had unleashed. It wasn't my chaos anymore. It was theirs. Gabriel turned to me, his eyes wide with panic. Jasmine, please tell them it's a mistake. We can fix this. Think of the family. I looked at him. and I felt absolutely nothing. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by this sweating, lying stranger. I am thinking of my family, I said. Maria and me. I turned and walked out of the room. Behind me, I heard Robert say, "Call the DA." I walked through the office, past the confused receptionist, out into the cool evening air. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Patricia. "I'm so sorry," the text read. "I'm so sorry." I didn't reply. I got into my car and drove. I picked up Maria from my friend's house. She was happy, oblivious, holding a drawing she had made of a cat. "Ready to go home, Mommy?" she asked. "Not yet, baby," I said. "Let's go see the ocean first." We drove to the old pier. It was windy, the salt spray stinging my cheeks. We bought hot chocolate from a stand and sat on a bench, watching the waves crash against the pilings. It was cold and dark and real. "Where's Daddy?" Maria asked, blowing on her steam. "Daddy made some very bad choices," I said. "He's going to be in timeout for a long, long time. We won't see him for a while." "Is he in trouble?" "Yes, baby. Big trouble." "Are we in trouble?" I looked at her. Her face was open, trusting. She didn't know about the money. She didn't know about the lies. She just knew that I was there. "No," I said, pulling her close. "We're not in trouble. We're safe." I pulled out my phone. I opened the family group chat, the one where Grace sent photos of her success, where Gabriel bragged about his deals. Delete group. Block number Gabrielle. Block number Grace. I put the phone away. I took a deep breath of the cold, clean air. I didn't know where we would live next week. I didn't know how I would rebuild the trust fund. But I knew one thing. I was free. If you believe that the truth always comes out in the end, hit that share button. And don't forget to follow for more stories about reclaiming your life.